they made some changes. They made some tweaks this offseason. What did you think of the offseason moves the Nets made, and did that make them a better team for the 2021-22 season?
It absolutely made them a better team, and this in the same way that the PJ Tucker pickup for the Milwaukee Bucks was a game changer for them. So what the Nets lost in guys who can go out there and get buckets, they made up for this offseason by getting guys who can go out there and get stops. And in the playoffs, you need as many of those guys as possible. So you add a Patty Mills who can not only get buckets on the offensive side of the floor, but can play menacing defense and pick you up full court. And so you add that guy to the mix. If you have any issues with Kyrie Irving not to be able to play however many games, you have a guy in Patty Mills who you feel very comfortable in. You lose a Landry Shamet, but you add a Patty Mills. Javon Carter, only known for defense. That's a guy who can get after it. Even though he's a guard, he's still strong enough to guard multiple positions. DeAndre Bembry is a defensive guy. They bring back Bruce Brown, who is a very tenacious defender in his own right and showed some stuff, a career-high field goal percentage on the offensive end last season. Blake Griffin is back. So I really do like the additions that the Nets have. The main thing, of course, is the core three and making sure that those guys are healthy and available. And if you have James, Kyrie, and Kevin, no matter what, you're going to have a superstar Hall of Fame offensive juggernaut on the court. If Kyrie checks out, James checks out, whatever it may be, you're going to have one or two of those guys on the floor at all times, and that's unfair. A team like Dallas, as soon as Luka goes to the bench, take advantage. Mm-hmm. Atlanta, as soon as Trae Young goes to the bench, take advantage. James Harden practices just as much with the second unit as he does with the actual starters, because that's the way Steve Nash staggers the lineup. And you have James who helps make everybody eat, and then he looks for his own shot. So it's at full strength. At full strength, and when they're focused, they're a unfair situation. And then now they have better defensive pieces that they can throw out there. I've seen defensive lineups that just look extremely tough with Javon Carter and Patty Mills in the backcourt. They throw Bruce Brown in there, Nicholas Claxton. We know how versatile of a defender he is. Paul Millsap, even at his age, can still get things done on the defensive side of the ball. They have lineups defensively that can cause some problems too. And again, it's a very, very hungry group.
I think that's going to make Nets fans excited about the improvements they could see on defense. But one of the things you mentioned, Grady, you talked about not only the team just being healthy, but having players available. There's been a lot talked about with Kyrie Irving and his vaccination status, especially in how it impacts players who will be playing here in New York. Do you feel like the whole situation being up in the air, we do not know at the moment of recording this whether Kyrie Irving has been vaccinated or not, do you feel like that can become a distraction for the team in the Brooklyn Nets?
I think this group is tight enough and they're deep enough to where it's not a distraction. If this was, again, using the examples before, if we're talking about Luka Doncic in Dallas, and Luka had a similar stance and they were playing, let's just say they were in New York, of course, with the rules that they have here, that could potentially be a distraction because it's dramatically impacting your season. The Nets are so deep that, of course, Nets fans want to see Kyrie Irving play every single home game. They don't need him to play every single home game. Let's just be honest, So this group is that tight, that close-knit, to where if this situation isn't resolved, in worst case scenario, he is missing home games. They're a close-knit group, and they're tight enough that it won't become a distraction. And the fact that they should win more than they lose, and they're deep enough, again, you insert Patty, you do whatever, they're going to be okay, even from a win-loss scenario. So it's a tough situation. It's a situation, I talked to Sean Marks about this in the middle of last week. It's a situation they're still very confident is going to get resolved before the start of the season. What that looks like, what that resolution is, whatever it may be, we don't have the answers right now, but they're very hopeful that this is going to work itself out. But just from a continuity, from a chemistry standpoint, these guys are close enough to where it's not going to fracture the group, and they're good enough that it's not going to have a dramatic effect on wins and losses.
That's good to hear about the group. Now, with that being said, too, Grady, You say that this is a strong, closely knit group. They're ready. They know there's championship aspirations. This is what's out on the table. But with that, last year I think a lot of people thought the Nets could win, but this year it's like the Nets better win. There's kind of that attitude, that vibe out there around that. Do you feel like with you what you just said about the group being so closely knit, can this team handle the pressure of the championship aspirations that are being placed upon them from all the people outside, whether it's media, fans, whatever it may be? Do you feel like the Nets can handle the pressure of being title favorites?
Yeah, they're not really dodging the expectations at all. And I've asked just about each guy about this, and everybody's a little bit different. There are guys like James who say, yeah, we're supposed to win and we will win, and scary hours and get ready and buckle up and this is what we're about and yada yada yada. We're gonna be unstoppable. And he just speaks from that standpoint. And his game really backs up that talk and from what we've seen. I can't wait to see him for an extended stretch, in the playoffs if he can stay healthy. There are guys who just aren't really active on social media or sports talk radio or pay attention and just really don't care what people on the outside are saying. And then there's other guys, Patty Mills in particular, Steve Nash talks like this all the time as the head coach. If you're not finding yourself in a pressure situation, what are you doing? What are we here for? This is fun. A pressure situation where people are expecting you to win. People are trying to take your head off over the course of an 82-game schedule, coming for your throat in the playoffs. Who doesn't want to be in a situation like this? Bring it on. So there's different personalities on this roster for sure, but they all feel like, okay, yeah, people are going to talk about us. We can go in a losing stretch. We can go in whatever. I mean, they dealt with just about everything you could think of last season, from contact tracing to Kyrie's absence for a stretch, the addition of James Harden, couldn't beat the Cleveland Cavaliers after acquiring James Harden, going through a little bit of a lull there, to figuring all that stuff out. Injuries to Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant got hurt in the first of 5 games on a West Coast road trip, which included games against Phoenix, the Lakers, and the Clippers. The first game was against the Golden State Warriors. Kevin Durant got hurt that game. Nets won, and then they won the other 4 games on that West Coast road trip. That's never been done before by the Nets. And they did that last season, even with Kevin Durant being out of the lineup. And in the game against Phoenix, James Harden didn't have Kyrie Irving in that game either. And he led an epic comeback and they pulled it out. So they have guys who have seen just about everything that you could throw at them. And so dealing with Stephen A. Smith ranting about them in the morning, dealing with sports talk radio giving them crap, or dealing with social media trolls is not going to affect dudes. I mean, when you look at this roster, bro, I mean, it's like 17 years in the league, 16 years in the league, 15 years in the league, 12 years in the league, 17 years in the league. It's crazy, man. This is a group that knows what they're getting into.
Okay, Grady, let me ask you this, because we saw, obviously, Milwaukee. I mean, we have questions about whether or not they would have legitimately, finished them off had, the Nets been healthy or Kevin Durant's foot been a little smaller, et cetera, et cetera.
You said they wouldn't.
They wouldn't.
Okay.
They wouldn't.
And I tend to agree with that. But
me too.
There's a certain confidence that guys talk about when, you actually get over the hump and get a championship. And although, the situation and the circumstances were in Milwaukee's favor last year, they did get it done behind Giannis, behind Chris Middleton, et cetera, Drew Holiday. And then Drew Holiday went out and won a gold medal with Kevin Durant on that same team together during the summer. So I don't know. Do you think that is going to just boost their confidence and ease them a little bit and remove some of that pressure from Milwaukee? And are they going to play freer this year? And if so, is that a threat to the Nets, in any sort of respect?
The main threat is that Giannis is a different breed. That's the main thing. I think that both things can be true. If the Nets were 100%, Milwaukee's not winning that series, period. It's also true that they finished off the Nets, they finished off Atlanta, and Giannis went supernova in that NBA Finals against the Phoenix Suns, and they deserve credit for winning an NBA championship. That is also very, very true. That said, I think we all want to see a full-strength Milwaukee Bucks team against a full-strength Brooklyn Nets team. And I would be, for one, extremely excited to see that slugfest. No matter how it turns out, if Milwaukee wins that series, I'm a basketball fan first. So I think it would take some amazing performances, and I would enjoy it with my popcorn. But that's still something in the back of Milwaukee's mind. Even when James Harden went down like 60 seconds into game one of the Eastern Conference semis, the Nets went out and smoked them in those two games with Kyrie and Kevin Durant. Like smoked them in those first two games. And then when Kyrie went down with the ankle injury, that's of course when the series shifted in Milwaukee's favor. But they were laying waste to them with just two of the superstars. So yeah, in a big time stage, big time moment, who knows what'll happen? And they face each other in a preseason game coming up, but they'll face each other to start the regular season. And Milwaukee may win that game, who knows? But it's still a different animal when you're talking about those guys being locked in come playoff time. So again, the big threat though is Giannis and his mentality. I'm so impressed with that dude. I'm so impressed with the way that he carries himself. I'm so impressed with his dog mentality. To be made fun of at the free throw line basically the entirety of the playoffs. Shaq didn't get. I mean, we make fun of Shaq and whatever, but they weren't counting when this brother was at the free throw line the way they were counting Giannis and howling, laughing as he bricked shot after shot. And even though he was bricking those shots, he still was aggressive in getting to the basket. Meanwhile, Ben Simmons is dumping the ball off to Matisse Thybulle. So it's like he kept coming, and I respect that. I respect the hell out of that, man. And then what was he doing in that final game of the NBA Finals? Man, he was knocking those free throws down. So that's a dog right there, man.
Yeah, and then you mentioned, you broke down basically the Eastern Conference earlier, but we're looking at, in the East at least, the Nets and Milwaukee being those top two teams. Who among the other teams, I guess, is best suited to break into that threshold? Because I do think that the Nets and Milwaukee are the top two, and then from there, it's like a pool of between, Philly, Miami, Atlanta, Boston, whoever. Maybe maybe Dexter's Knicks can creep in there. You know what I mean? They had a pretty good offseason. So we'll see. But
Grady, don't say that. You might piss off some of the Nets fan base if you say that.
No.
But who do you think? Who do you think is their biggest threat there? Because I would say it's Miami, to the surprise of not Dexter or anybody here. But
yeah, well, number one, we need to see what Philadelphia eventually gets in return for Ben Simmons. They are going to make that move at some point, and I don't think they're going to get equal value. But could it be a fit that still makes them very difficult? I mean, we can't forget the fact that Joel Embiid was an MVP candidate a season ago, so he's still going to be an issue for teams night in and night out, and he stays hungry. They still have very good players on that roster, and they're going to get more talent. They should not get draft picks. They're still going to get some more talent in return. I'm curious to see what they do. Tobias Harris, who I was forgetting, had a very strong season a season ago. We know that he's a solid player in this league. So we'll see what they get in return. And Philadelphia could be that third team, but there is still a gap between the top two in the next squad. So I say Miami. We'll see what happens with Philadelphia, but Philadelphia is right there. Atlanta, I really love what they did last season. And when you have a special season like that, I really keep an eye on whether or not that could potentially be a letdown. I think Trae Young is going to be special, but those other guys all have to elevate their game to another level for them to even have a chance to get back to a conference finals. On top of that, you mentioned the Celtics. I just don't believe in the Celtics, man. I just feel like that whole situation, even though Tatum and Brown are still extremely young. Right. I'm a big fan of Marcus Smart because he's, again, a dog mentality kind of dude. But I just don't feel like they have the right mix. I just don't feel like they have the right guys to complement each other to really put a team out there to be a threat in the Eastern Conference. And that's while saying that they have two of the brightest young stars in the NBA. They still just don't have the right mix. So I don't take the Celtics that seriously as a threat. Indiana has had talent. My roots are in Indiana. I still kind of keep an eye on them. They have talent. they just can't stay healthy. They can't stay healthy. I mean, you go to look at their roster; it's a respectable group.
For sure.
With Brogdon and Karis LeVert and Miles Turner and of course their big man Sabonis. T.J. Warren didn't play last season; he's back in the mix. I like their rookie Duarte. So they have some players, but it's always something with Indiana. And I think having a new head coach in the mix and bringing in Carlisle is going to help them out too. So yeah, there's definitely talent in the Eastern Conference. I'm forgetting teams, but the Knicks will be interesting. But that's another situation. How do you follow up what you did a season ago?
Yep.
Because mentally, sometimes if you're not having the same success, if you're taking losses, can you stay mentally tough enough to not let those losses snowball? And that's what will be interesting to see with both New York and Atlanta this season.